In Alex Traiman, the CEO and Jerusalem bureau chief of Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to be here with us today.
Josh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, I do want to talk to you about the arguments that are being made right now in front of the ICJ. We heard yesterday from South Africa their argument about Israel trying to commit genocide, they say, over in Gaza. And of course, Israel responding there saying that is not the case. This is not genocide, but it is a tragic war. So I want to get your thoughts overall on those comments being made before the ICJ.
Well, South Africa is really making a mockery of the claim of genocide. Israel's gone to extraordinary lengths to protect civilian casualties in Gaza, and they're doing so in Rafah as well. In fact, over 450,000 residents that have been holed up in Rafah have already taken Israeli instructions to leave that city as the IDF moves methodically through zones that it has divided specifically, and telegraphing exactly where it's going to be attacking in order to make sure that civilians are out of the harm's way.
And another thing that we kind of discussed there's been questions about the death toll in Gaza put out by the Hamas-led health ministry. Netanyahu specifically coming out and saying the ratio of terrorists to civilians killed is 1-to-1. What is your understanding of what Netanyahu is saying there?
Well, last week, the United Nations basically said that they were reducing the number of female and children casualties that they were recording by as much as 40%, which means that the death tolls that Hamas and the Gazan Health Ministry had been reporting civilians were grossly inflated. And with Israel saying that it has taken out over 15,000 terrorists, with the total death toll being around 30,000 now is being reported, that would mean that you have a 1-to-1 ratio of combatant to civilian casualties, which is among the lowest in the history of modern warfare, particularly in a densely populated urban fighting environment.
What do we know about 5 Israeli soldiers that were killed by friendly fire, we're told, this week over in Gaza? That information has been coming in over the last, I would say, couple days.
Yeah, extraordinarily unfortunate incident here in Israel, in the town of Jabalia, which is in the north of the Gaza Strip, an area that the IDF had secured earlier on in the war, but now has to double back as Hamas militants continue to terrorists fired 2 shells on the building, and 5 Israelis were killed and 7 injured, several of them serious.
There's been a lot of discussion about a post-war Gaza and who is actually going to be ruling over Gaza. Now, we do know, we heard from Hamas several days ago, their leadership saying that they would not accept anything that prevents them from being a part of ruling in Gaza. But I imagine Israel is not going to accept that even in part. They do not want Hamas to be part of ruling Gaza.
Yeah, for the IDF and for Prime Minister Netanyahu, the idea of Hamas taking over the Gaza Strip is a complete non-starter after this war is over. The question mark here is whether or not the Gaza Strip could be handed over to the Palestinian Authority. Prime Minister Netanyahu was adamant last week in saying that he's not going to let Gaza become Hamas-stan. He's not going to let it become Fatah-stan. Fatah is the faction of the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas. He does not want to see the Palestinian Authority take the Gaza Strip over after the war. The United States certainly does, and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant seemingly now taking the position of the United States, even against his own party leader and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And we did see some kind of back and forth between the two of them. Those comments by Gallant pretty much circulating all over social media everywhere, and there's been some backlash there. What do you make of that backlash?
Well, it's a bit of a mutiny on the point of Gallant to say that over Netanyahu's head. You have people here in Israel saying you cannot determine what is going to be on the day after in the Gaza Strip when you don't know what the situation on the day after is going to look like. First things first is to make sure that Hamas is out. Now, for Netanyahu, what he would like to see is local Palestinian leadership that is not connected to the Palestinian Authority. What Yoav Gallant is basically suggesting is that there's no way that Israel can remain in power in the Gaza Strip, not only militarily, but certainly not on the civil level as well. But I think there are many in Israel that think that the only way to make sure that that Gaza doesn't become a terror enclave once again in the immediate aftermath of the war is for significant Israeli presence, even after Hamas is taken out.
The U.S. House has now passed a measure that would prevent President Biden from preventing weapons from reaching Israel there. It still has to go through the Senate, and there's questions about whether it would pass. But Biden has said, the White House has said, that he would veto that measure if he did make it to his desk. So my question here is, would that create a bigger issue, a bigger divide between the U.S. and Israel if you have the president veto something here that would prevent him from sending weapons over to Israel?
Well, like as you mentioned, the obligation to send weapons to Israel from the United States is based on the Congress. And the Congress is the one that can determine whether those weapons are sent. If the president of the United States would seemingly block those weapons from coming, that would put a further rift between Israel and the current administration, but not between Israel and the United States, where Israel has overwhelming popular support and congressional support for its mission and to affect this war. I do think that we're seeing the souring of relations between the Biden administration and the Israeli government, and we'll have to. That's what makes this election in 2024 November so important for Israel, because it could have a great effect on what Israel's policies will be in conducting the war, not only in Gaza against Hamas, but also potentially in Lebanon against Hezbollah and even against Iran itself.
My last question for you here. There also seems to be a growing divide between Israel and Egypt, and I know there's been issues in the past there, but that divide that is happening, why does it appear that that is happening, and what effect could it have overall?
Well, as the IDF moves into Rafah, which is the southernmost city in Gaza, the IDF has taken control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the corridor between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. And the reason why the IDF did that is because there's been significant smuggling, not through tunnels that go from the Gaza Strip into Egypt, and also through the border itself, where it's being reported that bribes are allowing for goods to move through. So Israel wants to make sure that there can be no smuggling inside or out at this phase. There's been public spat between Egypt and Israel here, but Egypt hasn't recalled its ambassador, and there's good reason to believe that Egypt wants to maintain good relations with the state of Israel, and so hopefully the relations will not disintegrate further.
All right, Alex Traiman, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, like we mentioned, we're definitely seeing the difference of opinion here between Netanyahu and his government and the United States, and how they want Israel to carry out this war. We're seeing the defense minister now seemingly siding with the United States on this. A difficult moment for Israel. It could lead to some political chaos here in the Jewish state, and it's really an obligation for Israel to continue methodically and to win the war and to defeat Hamas and make sure that they're no longer possible of being a military or political force in the Gaza Strip.
All right, Alex, thank you again for taking the time, as always, to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, the time is